In our next session, we will be transported clear across the world to learn about a self-sustainable city emerging from the desert sands. Sounds like a new Disneyland attraction, doesn't it? Masdar, the city of the future. That sounds pretty cool. Masdar, the city of the future, is an arcology project in Abu Dhabi in United Arab Emirates. Its core is a planned city which relies on solar energy and other renewable energy sources. The city is envisioned to cover over 2.3 square miles and will be home to approximately 50,000 people and 1,500 businesses. Our next speaker, Jay Witherspoon, has more than 30 years of experience in managing and leading over 90 global water, odor, and wastewater projects in 3 major eco-cities sustainable developments in the Middle East. As project manager for Masdar City, he designed, built, and commissioned over $5.5 billion in constructed facilities, buildings, and infrastructure. Please allow me to welcome Jay to the stage. Thank
you. I get the honor to be the speaker before lunch, so hopefully I'll be able to give you some food for thought as you munch into your salmon or your chicken or vegetation. I happened to spend 3 years working on Masdar City and probably living outside of the U.S. the last 7 out of the last 8 years. I lived in Australia and New Zealand, so I kind of bring in a global perspective for you to think about as you worry about your water and energy and other aspects as we move forward. I have a short video for you to kind of wet your whistle on what Masdar City stands for and get a little picture that the city actually is being built, and so you get a kind of a sense of where they're headed with this.
Welcome to Masdar City, the city of possibilities. A daring and evolutionary journey to build the world's most advanced and sustainable community. A city we're shaping with an eye for a better future. Masdar City is centrally and strategically located next to Abu Dhabi Airport, from where major international markets can be reached within hours. The city is built using traditional Arabic architecture combined with modern technology and design. Narrow walkways capture the wind and provide shade, making the perceived temperature 10 degrees cooler in Masdar City than elsewhere in Abu Dhabi, encouraging a healthy and comfortable lifestyle, where everything is within walking distance. The buildings are powered by clean energy, constructed using green building materials and designed to reduce energy and water consumption by 40%. This modern work-life space is made possible by the forward-thinking approach in designing every detail of Masdar City, making it the green print for cities across the world. But this is just the beginning. Masdar City will grow one neighborhood at a time, adding new businesses, schools, restaurants, apartments, and so much more. Eventually, over 90,000 people will live and work in the city. Throughout the expansion, residential, cultural, and commercial areas will be interwoven with parks and a wide variety of services and amenities. Residents and visitors can leave their cars behind and enjoy the open and pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods. Integrated, clean, and smart transportation systems, including a fleet of electric vehicles and driverless cars, keep the city accessible and livable as it grows. Masdar City is a vibrant place. It brings together a diverse range of tenants and professionals, creating a unique business climate. The city is a free zone that welcomes companies both large and small. With the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology at the city's core, they can count on highly skilled graduates and opportunities for research partnerships.
When we set up our company, it was as simple as 1, 2, 3 steps and 5 days. That's all it took to start up in Masdar City. Office space is immediately available and taxes and import tariffs are non-existent. Setting up our company in Masdar City gave us a competitive edge in the Emirates and around the globe. Join us and the many other companies who have chosen Masdar City to be the home of their business.
Pretty inspiring, huh? I was like a child in a candy store when I first went onto the Masdar lot, and it was just a sand field. But I'll give you a little bit more details on how they made it a reality. I'll touch upon some of the new thinking that's been going on, the Masdar approach, some water sustainability solutions that they've been experimenting with, and some conclusions. In the past, we made a lot of decisions on trying to balance the economic feasibility between water, energy, and carbon, but we're seeing you need to have energy to produce water, and actually water can produce energy. And so the binding element that we were looking at in kind of our new thinking is how's the carbon really managed in that approach or that process. And we're also seeing that in areas that have high drought, and we're starting to use more of the impaired waters as we move forward, we're seeing the energy footprint go up. We just heard about some energy right before my talk, how it's impacting it. So what we're doing at Masdar City is going beyond the currency aspect of it and looking at the carbon footprint. And so we're looking at carbon as our currency, and we're making decisions based on carbon and not on the economic feasibility of it or how it works out today. So taking that three-pronged approach and looking at how carbon is working and how we could manage our approach and our technology selections as we move forward. Just a quick idea on some sustainability, how we would address the carbon, energy, and water dynamics and challenges. When I was born and today, the population growth has doubled. And when I probably kick off the planet, it'll be doubled again. So how are we going to feed these people and how are we going to supply water to these people is something that we need to kind of take a look at on a global basis, not just in California. Are we growing the right food products in the right regions? Are we growing food products that demand a lot of water that could be grown in other areas and then imported on a global basis and not just on a California basis? How are we going to be managing the climate uncertainties? We'll still get the same amount of water in California, but it'll be coming sooner and it won't be in snowmelt. So how are we going to manage that type of water as it moves forward? And also looking at how we could work on regulations that allows us to have some innovations and some leadway into moving forward and some innovations that we haven't thought about. You heard about some of those earlier this morning. Then on the positive side, we could start looking at how do we do green water treatment, how do we take care of our biofuels and vertical farms. I was shown a 19-story high-rise that was developed by a Spanish architect that 8 of those floors of that 19-story building were a vertical farm. And so they could live and stay in that building your whole life, never have to go outside other than maybe if you want to put clothes on or something like that. And you could have your food products, protein, vegetables all grown in that area without any soil. So that's kind of some of the thinking about how do we manage our agricultural approaches in the future to minimize the amount of footprint taken up by land as well as the amount of water being demanded. And there's always the renewables, and we need to do some more inlays onto those as we go forward, and I'll show you some of the ideas that Masdar had done in those areas. The city is being built. The vision is over on the, over on that side. And that's what it looks like, probably a little bit like Southern California in the old days as you go forth, and then you put people in there. So how are you going to put people into a desert environment? And the idea here is if you could build a sustainable city in the worst possible climate conditions, that means poor water, extreme heats, probably hotter than here, and no vegetation, and you can make it work. You could take that concept and apply it globally to other locations. So you could pull components off for your need and use it as you go forward. So in Masdar's vision, they're really looking to make Abu Dhabi the preeminent source of renewable energy knowledge. The leaders that I talked to in Abu Dhabi, they don't think next generation, they think 6 generations down. They're wondering what their 6th-generation kids are going to be inherited from them as they move forward. And so their idea is they know that fossil fuels have limitations. And so after fossil fuels are gone, what will the next 6 generations have to deal with as far as energy? And that's with renewable energy. And so their focus is really to develop that technology early, optimize it, show it can work, and then that will be what they'll be able to sell. Instead of a drop of oil, they'll be selling this knowledge as they move forward. Their values are agile. They want to adapt to the market. They have flexibility. They want to be commercial, so anything they install will have a return on investment, but it also probably have a premium. It has to be sustainable, and it has to be grounded. This gives you a little bit of an overview of their brand and some of the services that they're offering to invest in. They're looking at clean energy development. They're doing a lot of research and development. They're looking for sustainable urban development. and they're looking at sustainable procurement and supply products. So they have actual services and fields that they do that, as well as they're offering to do consulting. To boil it down, we took the vision of the leaders of the UAE and we put it in the center. That safeguards their values. And from that, we filter outward into the policies and thoughts of how the city is going to be set up, the specifications and requirements. That then feeds into a sustainability assessment criteria. So any type of, anything into the city has been thought through, all the way from the spigots on the faucets, to the buildings themselves, to the active cooling systems, to the technology. It's all been thought through this chain. So we take the vision, move it out, and then we put it into actual policies, specifications, and approaches. And then we take a look at how we assess that with our sustainability credibility and move it forward. So it's really taking a vision-centric sustainability model and moving it forward. So how would you do that? So how can you achieve a sustainable, commercially viable, and retain the Masdar City's brand? When I first walked onto Masdar City, we were going to be the first carbon neutral city in the world. That meant that we were going to be self-sustaining. That had to get changed, because if we would have built the city as it was envisioned in the original master plan, it would be carbon free, but there would be no one living there because it would cost you 3,000 times more than the rental cost that you would have at a building next door to us. So we went back and looked at how we take the goals and key progress and performance indicators, run it through an integration model, and then also looking at our sustainability goals so that we'd have a commercially viable facility. We'd be able to do the cradle-to-cradle balancing that we want to do on our sustainability approach, have significant carbon footprint reductions to get us as close as we could to carbon neutrality. The carbon goals were set on not only active carbon, operating carbon, but also embedded carbon. So we were looking at embedded carbon and what we call the whole carbon life cycle. Most of the carbon you see when people say they're carbon neutral is based on operating carbon. And so a good example of that is you look at a Prius car and you could say that it's carbon neutral, but in reality, a diesel truck is more sustainable than that Prius, because you don't take the embedded carbon that's included in the Prius, which is the batteries. In a diesel truck, you have a piece of equipment that has a certain burn rate. And so if you do the whole life carbon, you would be going more for a diesel truck versus a Prius. Now that's today, but it may be tomorrow we could come up with a more sustainable embedded carbon on the Prius side. So whenever I get past in my SUV and with a Prius, I always kind of think, my car's probably a little bit better than yours because I run on diesel. That's just me. To take that, and how do you make a sustainable city? So you look at your management of energy, water, and waste, and you look at the tools that you have in order to develop a sustainable city in your city planning or in your industry or your utility. So you have planning, you have sustainable materials, and you have transport. What we did for Masdar City is probably develop an integrating model that takes a look at your wastewater management, your energy supply and demand, your solids management, and your water management. And we just said nothing on that chart is a waste. We have to reuse or recycle everything that is produced from that city. So we take the wastewater, we turn it into water that we can use for laundering or watering our landscapes. We take the solids waste, we segregate it into energy, composting, or whatever. So everything that we generate at the plant is a revenue generator and not a waste taker. And so that mentality allowed us to kind of balance out how we would have a city that could get us as close as we could to carbon neutrality and meet our economic goals. So let's step into some of the technology innovations that we've stumbled upon and we're working through as we develop the city. This is a kind of a baseline integration map where we look at the generation. So we have generation, waste to energy. Where does it come from? It comes from the waste collection or the wastewater that comes into the plant. How do we convert that in a cost-effective manner so that we can supply energy into our scheme that then could be used for district cooling? The number one energy demand in the desert is cooling, air conditioning. And the air conditioning is run about 9 to 10 months a year. And then we have some similar climate to Florida or Southern California. We also have sources from Mother Nature, such as PV. We're also looking at PV to thermal, and we're looking at solar thermal. This kind of shows you the individual loops for water, waste management, and how we would balance out our system so that we could have an integration map that plays off on each other. We're taking waste heat, for example, from our PV off the rooftops and thermal and converting it into air conditioning by doing chilled water. So that's innovation, taking a hot source that you normally have as a waste energy and then converting it into chilled water. So it's kind of looking at how you integrate your whole system as you go forth. When you advertise that you have over $24 billion to spend in 10 years and you're a technology innovation city, you see anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 of these crazy nuts who bring any type of innovation they possibly can to get money. And so what we had to do is kind of sort through that process to come up with a roadmap so that we could assure ourselves that we could make 75% of, say, our energy gap by kind of proven or innovative technologies that are near commercialization, and then support 25% of the nuts that want to come out and really have some play in that. One area I call kind of a nut, they're not nuts, but they're really creative people, was nanotechnology. I'll show you some pictures of solar panels. Solar panels have problems with dust and salts. And so we were finding that after 2 weeks of cleaning one of our solar panels, the efficiency dropped off a point a day after that. So it would go from a 20% or 15% efficiency down to 7%. And that's just because of coating of dust. And so we had a person from England who had been developing a nano coating that allows the light to pass through, allows the efficiency to improve on the solar panel. And the cleanings went from 2 weeks to 3 months. So what does that mean? The cleanings were usually done with water. So if we go to a 3-month period, we're not cleaning all these fields with water. So there's a lot of trying to get that 25% that's really there that has to be developed, paid for by going through this approach. Again, it was a triple bottom line strategy where you looked at environmental, socially acceptable, and economically viable. It helps us fill our gaps as we move forward. This is just some shots. We first started out with an international solar panel demonstration. We had over 35 manufacturers of solar panels, various different types of solar material, and we did testing on them on a daily basis. And what we found is about every 2 weeks we had a little guy out there with a brush cleaning off the panels, and we started to realize that we also have to factor in our decision if we're going to put these on the roofs, how we're going to maintain those and keep them clean, because the efficiencies really drop off from the sand and the ocean salts that accumulate to them. At the time, the 10 MVV plant that you saw in the video was the largest in the Middle East. There's also going to be a lot of growth in that area, but again, you have to think about how do you keep them clean, efficient, and moving them forward. The cities themselves, if you notice, they're mostly designed for walking, and if you look at the buildings, they're all kind of muted. That's because we didn't want the sun to hit one building, reflect into another building to cause the temperature of that building to rise. We saw anywhere from a 5 to 10 degree raise in temperature when you had like a shiny surface that the light hit and bounced into the adjacent building. And so all our building materials are muted so that that light is either absorbed or dissipated. Also, the narrowness allows to have shading in the areas, and then we align the city so that the winds from the coast would blow in and blow out, so it naturally breathed during the day. And that's another innovations that we kind of did. And then we had a natural air cooling tower, and I'll show you a little bit picture of that in the next slide. The other aspect is for user comfort. You'll see umbrellas like this in Singapore, and I think there's some in Beijing and other locations. So during the day, the umbrellas are open to keep shading, to keep the temperatures down as you walk through the city. At night, they drop back down to allow any trapped heat to flow out. If you have a fireplace, heat rises, and we designed a large natural ventilation chimney that will actually cause cooling. So you could get enough velocity from the heat generated at the grade that as it goes up the stack, it will actually generate a cooling factor for you. The electronic cars are self-driven, and the idea was that you could touch your watch and that car would be at your location within 5 minutes, but that's still in a pilot stage. And then we looked at the mirrors and focusing the light towards heating and developing energy that fashion. This is just a bullet list. You probably can't read all the innovations, but the key areas is we were looking at thermal energy. If you drill a well in the Middle East, if you go below about 7 kilometers, you hit oil. And if you're above 7 kilometers to about 5, you could have some hot water. The hot water is not hot enough for you to directly generate electricity, but it's hot enough for us to convert it into cooling. So we could use it for chilled water. So we have a thermal well on site that we don't hit the oil, which I wanted to because I want to have a little extra money in my pocket. But we take that water, we turn it into chilled water, which then is a source, and then we put it back into formation. We also looked at segregation of toilets, separating urine from waste, and just treating the urine cycle and trying to recover some of the nutrients and minerals that are in our urine. And then the biosolids is a lot easier to manage and a lot easier to flow. We looked at green concrete. How green is green? We were looking at some of the business certification programs. About the most extent you see is about 15%. Originally, Masdar was at 75% green concrete. And it was not cost effective and it was not viable, so we brought them back down to about 15%. Just in the water vision, they really wanted to have something go forward. I'll slip through these pretty quickly. Some of their challenges are their water consumption. If you look at the chart, the Abu Dhabi average is around 550 liters per person per day. The U.S. is not much below that, and it's because the U.S. is used to a lot of abundancy. In Europe, you're seeing about half that, right around the 200 to 180 range. And so the idea at Masdar was to change behavior and to move us more towards the best area that we could do with enlightened behavior. We had limited resources. The groundwater salt content was 250,000 part per million. A typical ocean is right around 35,000 part per million. So we were basically, if we took the groundwater, we were harvesting salt with a little bit of water coming out. So we had to figure out how to deal with that as we move forward. We wanted to make sure we had a balance on the citywide approach, and we also wanted to make sure that we could demonstrate that we can meet our goals to the world. This just kind of gives you an overview of their total water conservation approach. They were going to reduce the reliance on desalination by 70%. They were going to have 100% recycle of any water that came onto the plant, and then we're going to look at energy and nutrient recovery from the biosolids. So this is the kind of approach. Go business as usual. Our first step was go to 180 and then get to a point where we could get down to the 105 liters per person per day. Now, what does that mean? We have a university in the middle of our city, and so we were experimenting with our college students. And so we were seeing how low of a flow out of a shower would they tolerate before they cried uncle. And so we got it down pretty low where there's hardly any water coming out, and they seem to get into that. But that's the extremes you have to get to if you want to get down to 105 liters per day per person. Just to quickly go through their strategy, they were minimizing consumption and controlling leakage, which is a major problem in the Middle East, maximize the recycled water, and look at full capacity for their plant. The chart you see here is you could do only so much with water conservation measures like low flow toilets, showers, and conservation, and you get down to that belly of that peak, and then you have to start to use energy in order to treat the impaired waters, the desalination, the not suitable water, the brackish water. Then you would go back up your energy line, and again, that's your carbon footprint, and energy may be becoming as sacred as water. The dotted line there is an idea or strategy that you could use renewable energies, such as solar or thermal, to get to that point, so that you don't hit that energy peak as you move forward. Just a quick overview of the water demand, typical of a large city, taking a look at how it works with the demands between residents, industry, and commercial. And I had to speed this up. And then we were also seeing if we could introduce some savings on the carbon side by inducing behavioral. And so we're showing you kind of business as usual, and then with our KPIs, once they're achieved, we'll be able to show a delta savings in the operating carbon. And again, we're using operating carbon as our currency and not cost. And then we also found that business as usual is around 20% leakage from the water distribution system in the Middle East. And we can see the carbon footprint leakage as you tighten up those pipes and put them into more containment areas. So you see a significant drop in the carbon footprint as you go from 20% down to our goal was at 5%. The other areas that I thought was very interesting is that we want to use 100% of our recycled water. We see significant carbon footprint savings by going to that approach. And in the Middle East, especially in Abu Dhabi, they really love their date trees, and they really love the, I call them golf course lawns. At Masdar City, we went with more of a desert scape. So I think you'll start to see that as an effective way to break up a city so it doesn't look like a prison, but also have a green feel to it in a more of a natural setting of what you see. And then finally, we were looking at the capacity and how we would go about it. So we're using modern technology, and we're using the membrane bioreactors for water treatment that were generated by solar energy. So it was a complete cycle that was allowing us to drop, again, as we treat the water, we're able to use renewables to keep our energy footprint at a neutral level. Kind of how those options worked out on the operating carbon side is when we get to option 3, which is the recycled water, we're seeing significant reductions in our footprint and savings, which overall helped us. Kind of in summary, this is a layout of the city today. It's very modern. It has a modern feel to it. We have some solar panels on our roofs. We decided that that's not cost effective, and we're more moving towards solar thermals as we go forth. And this is the crew that we finished up our master plan and some of the program work, and I'm open to any of your questions. I appreciate your time. Thank you.